This is Greg Kesich. I'm the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald, and I'm here today with the skeleton crew.
You're saying I've lost some weight.
I'm here with Alan, Caron, and yes. Susan Collins is all over the news, national news, local news. What's going on? What's your take?
It's an incredible moment for her. I mean, she really is a national figure, and she's always been a prominent figure in the Senate, but I think this is different. She really is at the pivot point on so many issues. It's got to be exhilarating and exhausting at the same time. But she's doing it.
Yeah, so let's break it down a little bit. So she was on the Sunday talk shows on Sunday,
right.
and said that we needed a special investigator for the Intelligence Committee review of the Russia situation, tampering in the election results. And it seems to be she seems to have found a middle point between we don't need anything and we need an independent investigation or an independent committee.
Yeah.
Is that
I thought the most interesting part of her statement, so much of this is happening behind the scenes.
Right.
And on Thursday, we're going to have a very dramatic in front of the scenes hearing with Comey at the center of it. But I think Susan Collins saying that the committee needed an investigator to lead their own investigation tells me that the investigation is broadening and there's enough there that they can't handle it.
Right.
I mean, it was in a sense an admission that this is bigger than our intelligence committee can manage. And that, it's a signal.
Uh-huh.
She could just as easily have said, yeah, we're going to wrap this up pretty soon.
That's
we
true.
think we have a handle on it. But instead, it's like, this is bigger than we are.
Well, they're supposed to be overseeing the entire intelligence community and the United States intelligence policy, and they can't focus strictly on who came to
Right.
Trump Tower
Right.
and met with attorney Michael Cohen and which one of Trump's in-laws met with the Russian banker.
But her statement runs in complete conflict with the general Trump administration rallying their base messaging, which is that there's nothing there, this is all a scam, and it's all made up by the media. And then you have Susan Collins, prominent Republican, saying, oh yeah, there's more here than we can do.
The other thing she said was that she was opposed to Trump's travel ban more emphatically than she has in the past, and for a specific reason. And then in today's New York Times, she was talking about healthcare generally and different alternative ideas for healthcare that are way at odds with the right wing of her party and certainly with what the House produced, and said that she would support Medicaid expansion in Maine, which she's always been very cautious about not weighing in on Maine issues. And this was something that's been before the legislature a number of times, and she has never weighed in on it. So for her to say that she is in favor of Maine expanding Medicaid really is, I think, a big step in a direction, but I don't know what direction. Yeah. What's your sense in that?
Well, first, I'm very impressed in that article by the depth of her knowledge about the healthcare issue. She has said before that she's looking for ways to have more people insured, not less. That's a huge problem for Republicans in the Senate because she's not alone as they're trying to craft a health bill. It's a huge problem. I don't even know how they overcome it. But now, the statement you point to is really almost a direct resistance to the LePage approach on healthcare. So you're right. I mean, she has been very careful not to contradict LePage and this administration's ideas. And here you have something about as prominent as it could be.
Right. Well, the speculation is that she's running for governor, and when I hear something like that, it seems to add to that. Do you think that there's any relevance there?
I suspect that decision hasn't been made, and it won't be made until this session of the Senate is over and they see what's actually happened. If, as it now appears, the Trump series of big ideas go nowhere, and are gridlocked, next year it's all about campaigning.
Yeah.
So you can't get anything done next year. You have to get it done in the remaining 5 weeks or whatever you have before the August break. So I think if they get through this session and those big ideas don't materialize, there's not much more for her to do in the Senate, I suspect, except sort of wait around.
Well, and play defense.
Play defense, but I think they'll decide at the end of the summer. Mm-hmm. They'll make an assessment, and if she decides to come here, run for governor, she's acquitting herself well now with moderates around the state, I think, and with many Democrats. So there are Democrats who are aggressively in opposition to her for reasons that I don't entirely understand. But I think overall it will be hard to fire up a lot of people, even on the Democratic side, to offer meaningful opposition if she runs for governor.
Yeah. There's a guy that runs a blog called Collins Watch out of New York, and he writes about her every day.
Wow.
And every day that I write about her, he writes me and tells me that I'm not tough enough. And every day I don't write about her, he writes me and tells me that I should write about her. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And there's a sense that, but she never had 100% support.
Right.
But she has close to 70%. You'd think it wouldn't be a problem. What about in a primary, though?
Yeah, if you were a part of her team looking at that scenario of running for governor, the first thing you've got to do is get through the far right wing that tends to control the primary process, and that really, in a lot of ways, drove Olympia Snowe out of politics when she was preparing to run for re-election.
She got booed at an event.
These folks they're angry, and they're angry at everybody, including rhinos or so-called Republicans, and they like to sort of kill each other off.
Yeah.
And so for Susan Collins, a Republican could have 70% public support and lose a Republican primary. This can happen with Democrats in the same way on the other side. So I suspect that in a race for governor, the only thing that concerns them is the Republican primary, not the general election. Because if she's a Republican nominee, she will be the governor of Maine. I don't think there's any question about it. But how do you get through the gauntlet of the knives and axes and batons in the Republican primary? And so I'm beginning to wonder whether she would become an independent, follow the Angus King path, not have to go through that gauntlet. Take the criticism from really truly partisan Republicans, but become the governor of Maine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, part of her big vote totals in the past included disgruntled right conservatives who hated fill in the blank Tom Allen, Shelley Pingree, Shanna Bellows, and she wouldn't be able to attract that group if she ran as an independent. But that's an interesting idea. I was talking to a Republican last week who said, he didn't know anything about her decision-making process, but he said if she is going to run, his idea would be to run a primary campaign encouraging Republicans to sign up as Republicans. I mean, did I say independents to sign up as Republicans so they could vote in the primary?
I think a lot of that would
make
happen
that the real focus
if she ran that kind of campaign. But again, if the choice for her is let's go remake the Republican Party so it'll accept moderates, or let's just bypass that primary with a simple act of removing your registration. That idea, for the first time I've ever imagined for Susan Collins, that idea would have some attractiveness, I think.
Yeah. So back to Maine. Over the weekend, I went to a rally that was put on by the Mainers for Accountable Leadership, which is one of the indivisible groups, and it had a number of co-sponsoring groups from around the state. And the subject was the Russia investigation and trying to put pressure on the leaders of our senators to put pressure on them to hire or create an independent committee to investigate Russia involvement in the election. And it was an interesting contrast to the rallies from last winter, January, when there was 10,000 people marching down Congress Street for the Women's March. And then I went to another rally a week later that was just called overnight to the first travel ban, and there was something like 3,000 people jammed into the jetport with no notice, and they were very united and motivated. And I really feel like that movement has lost some steam over the last few months, and Trump is offending people on so many fronts at once that it's kind of dissipating people's energy. It occurred to me anyway. So I went to this rally down in Portland, and it was really a very small group, about 200 people, maybe 250 people, and they were talking about this Russia issue, and I really realized that this is it's not a good mass mobilization issue, because so much of it, like you said, is happening behind closed doors, far away. It's going to happen in court. And what do we want? We want an independent commission, that will resolve all our questions. When do we want it?
I'm leaving work for that. Tens of thousands of people.
Right. And it's not, it's something like healthcare or the climate, where people have a direct, personal, physical something at stake. There seems less at stake with the Russia thing. It's just sort of a sense that
I think it's hard for the opposition to coalesce, because everything that Trump has done is stuck somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The immigration ban is stuck in the courts. There's no role for the public really, except to wait to see what the courts do, all the way up through the Supreme Court, which could take who knows how long. So you can't. I mean, you can hold a rally or two, but after a while, you got to have something to do. Healthcare. They do the little mirage vote in the House. They get it over the Senate. There is nothing happening in the Senate that's going to produce an outcome. You sort of need a bill. You need something to rally against rather than a concept. We haven't even gotten to tax reform, infrastructure. They're starting to move on, but in a sense, it's taking so long for this administration to approach getting something done that there isn't much to rally against. I think the climate thing, what's happened in both healthcare and now in climate is new coalitions are being forged in opposition to Trump's direction on those issues. I mean, I think this climate thing is going to spawn a new climate movement in America that's going to have major corporations and alternative energy folks and environmentalists, many of whom have been working together more quietly for a while. I don't think it's going to be quiet anymore. I think people are mad about that one.
Interestingly, the polling I've seen about climate is that Republicans, basically as a group, 60% don't believe in it. We're divided on this issue. It looks like the overwhelming majority of people want to do something about carbon pollution and the climate. But if you're really worried about your core Republican voters who are going to elect members of the House of Representatives, who are the people who get to decide whether or not you're going to be impeached, you can really see why Trump's position fits right in with them. Anyway, so I'm at this kind of lackluster rally with a not very well attended, not very much emotional intensity. And the final speaker of the day was Janet Mills, who is rumored to be a candidate for governor, much like Susan Collins is rumored to be. Janet Mills is really rumored to be likely candidate for governor. And she's the only one in the field who came to this event. And when she came up to the stand to start speaking, a group of protesters got up in front of her, holding up signs, screaming, shouting her down. You couldn't hear a word that she said, even though she had the microphone. And what they were protesting about was her position as Attorney General signing the briefs representing the state in a dispute with the Penobscot Indians about whether or not the Indians can regulate the water quality in the Penobscot River. And they had tremendous emotional intensity. And they were yelling and screaming, and every time Janet moved, they would move. She tried to go down the stairs. I thought at one point she was going to get knocked down. I mean, it was by far the most memorable moment of this thing, and it made me think. If this was a unity event of bringing people together, it was a fiasco. It was the worst unity event I've ever seen. What do you think? I mean, is there a cohesive movement that's going to come out of this anti-Trump stuff, or does it just all splinter?
Well, I think that particular group and that issue is kind of a one-off.
Sure.
On the larger Trump stuff. That group's been dogging her. I saw them 2 years ago at the USM do almost exactly the same thing. And it's a very small group.
Right.
It's very animated. It's more than a nuisance for Janet Mills, because Janet is really the consummate insider candidate for the Democratic primary. And the primary for governor on the Democratic side has been pretty good at nominating insiders for a while, producing not much success in the general. But, she's got the inside track for that nomination. But this is the kind of stuff that gets people wondering, and I'm sure Janet would like to have the issue removed, but it's too late. I feel badly for her. Janet's a good friend of mine, and here she gets beat up all the time for not supporting the governor and his positions, and in this issue she supported the governor. Now she's getting beat up by the other side, so she's got like no winning path here. This could be a real problem for her in the nomination.
I think she's supporting what the law says.
Right. That's what she's supposed to do.
Right.
But let's not confuse that with politics.
Yeah, no, I don't think that this is like a widespread movement.
No.
I just, it strikes me that, when the Democrats had their convention last summer, people were saying, America doesn't need to be great again. America's already great. And for the people in that room, for the Democratic donor class, for sort of middle class people, maybe it is, maybe that's how they see it. But there's also a large group of people out there who America is not great for, right. And Trump was able to at least pay lip service to them, but. Is there a way for Democrats to speak to the people who are not having the experience of this is a great country and I'm doing terrific? And it strikes me a lot of the Mainers for Accountable Leadership and the individual groups are really kind of speaking from the perspective that Trump is this aberration and a terrible thing that just happened to us in November. Everything was fine, and now it's not normal. And I there's a messaging issue there that I think they're really going to have to come to grips with.
Yeah, it's not clear to me that the Democratic Party has been learning from the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Trump is exactly what LePage was here, and the base of the Democratic Party has been shrinking over time. We know that. It's been shrinking in blue-collar areas just as it has around the country. So I'm not sure. I mean, and you have two groups that don't seem to get that. One is some insiders, people who just want to keep doing what they've been doing forevermore, and people way on the outside who, so I think it's a problem for Democrats in general. I have some really good friends who are supporting Adam Cody, and which were talking him up to me the other day, and what I think, and I hadn't really thought about it much, but Adam Cody's, as I have read, is probably the kind of candidate who could broaden the base of the Democratic Party, but he's not going to be. It's almost impossible for him to become the nominee in the same way that it is for Susan Collins on the other side. That partisan gauntlet on the left excludes people who don't sing from the hymnal, who don't recite the dogma, over and over on every issue. And if you vary on one issue, they'll come after you. And this is the history, unfortunately, of the Democratic primary over the last 20 or 25 years. So they have the same problem. They have a similar but different problem that Republicans have. It's hard to see, and that's why no Democrat has won a statewide election since George Mitchell. They just can't produce the kind of broad vision candidate out of those primaries.
Well, what about
they revert back to, hey, who's been around for 30 years? Who can we have confidence that they'll just repeat the stuff we always say?
What about the enthusiasm gap that the Democrats seem to have, that people aren't excited about being a Democrat?
The brand has suffered. I think both parties have huge problems right now, and the brand of both parties has suffered mightily on the Republican side because they're nominating what would have been fringe candidates 15 years ago, in which the far right has dominated the process. On the Democratic side, they've been nominating status quo candidates. And then you have the emergence of the Bernie Sanders movement that is sick to death for that stuff.
Right.
But how does the party accommodate those two things? And it's not clear to me that will happen.
I know. Well, I'm looking for the Bernie Sanders movement. I was expecting it to be more of a force in Augusta this year, and as we head into the next election. Yeah. But it seems to have evaporated. All I see is a lot of kind of mean-spirited stuff on Facebook, critical of mainstream politicians, but I don't see an alternative vision being pushed forward.
Yeah, again, it's hard to know when you have a movement galvanized around a candidate.
Yeah.
It's hard to sustain that energy once the candidate has gone back to normal life and is, in this case, in the U.S. Senate. So I think that's a movement sort of awaiting the next opportunity.
Okay, so what about in Augusta? Are they going to have a budget? We're going to shut down? We're going to go back, join Massachusetts? What's going to happen?
For the first time in a long time, I'm not sure they're going to have a budget. I think the divisions are serious enough around this 3% income tax. And I agree with what you wrote this week. It's a terrible mistake for Republicans if we end up shutting down government and they're doing it because people earning $200,000 or more a year are going to get some fractional tax increase on everything over $200,000.
Yeah.
So, but they're all kind of dug in, and I think there's a parallel to the congressional problem, which is the House of Representatives is fiercely conservative and ideological. So, if what they're saying is true, that they're not going to budge, we're going to have a shutdown. I think they will budge. I think the Democrats will move to a compromise position. And the move that the House Majority Leader made, which is we'll find $100 million for somewhere somehow.
That just happened to me last week. I found $100 million on the couch. Yeah, it was great.
I love that. You turn those cushions over, and you just never know what you're going to find. But I haven't felt for a long time that there was a chance of a shutdown, and there is a chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen. They could have a deal this coming weekend.
Yeah.
But selling the deal in their own caucuses will be the problem on both sides.
Right.
That's where we could not have a budget because you need a 2/3 vote. And if you can't sell a compromise in your own caucus, and I think they'll struggle on both sides to do that, then you have a problem.
So I've been watching what the Democrats have been saying, particularly Sarah Gideon, all along, and she's talking a lot very specifically about the 55%, the part of the education budget that should come from state taxes, from income tax and sales tax. But she doesn't ever say 3%. You never hear that number come out of her mouth. And so to me, that's where the deal is to be made.
Yeah, I think she's been very clear about that.
Find some way to get there.
You guys, she's been very clear. We want more money for education. You guys, if you don't want to do the 3%, find something else.
Right.
That's been her position all along. I'm not sure everybody in the caucus agrees with that position. There's a lot of people wedded to it's got to be this. It's got to be rich people paying for it, nobody else. But if the choice of shutting down government or finding another way to fund education, which is, I think, where all the conversation is. If they have a deal, it will be on a new idea or a different way. It may include some tax increases for upper income people, but it will have to be something else.
It could be like 1.3%, and then Mike Thibodeau's $100 million, and then maybe somebody else could find $100 million.
And if Sarah Gideon ends up taking a lot of heat in the caucus, but the state comes out of this with something like 55% going to education, that'll be a great success for her and for Democrats, and they'll all move on. It'll all cool off.
And if people's property taxes don't go up. I mean, that's to the. I was on a call-in show on a radio station, and somebody called in to say he was a big supporter of Mary Mayhew and what a great job she did with the DHHS budget. Sounds like a very conservative guy, and he was also a school board member somewhere in the Mid-Coast. And he said, now if they could just use that kind of attention to the rest of the budget and send more money to my school district.
Wait for it.
I don't think that's what they have in mind, sir.
I'm in favor of cutting your government.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm in favor of cutting all the programs that I don't use.
But so I think there is anybody who's really following these school budgets knows that there's not a lot of fat, and they really do need more money from the state.
Yeah.
So by next week we'll know, baby.
Let's hope so.
And thanks a lot for coming in.
Bye.
This is a Press Herald podcast. You can hear past episodes at pressherald.com/podcasts. You can subscribe on iTunes, on Android devices, and stream on Stitcher. Please email comments and questions to letterstotheeditor@pressherald.com. Thank you for listening.